Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today's video is going to be the Game Week 19 team selection. I think this is actually one of the most interesting game weeks because first of all, we have one of our first double game weeks, and also we have the impacts of a lot of clashes. So Arsenal versus Newcastle. You'll have to decide what you want to do with your Arsenal Newcastle assets. This might be the first time that we ever really consider dropping Trippier onto the bench, or even someone like Martinelli. So that's a good example to talk about what happens when you have these mirror matchups, and then what to do with the 2 free transfers that I had saved up, because I rolled a free transfer in Game Week 18 and it was a little bit regretful because of the news with Cancelo being benched. We didn't get any major sources or any kind of major leakers actually confirming this before the deadline, but it did actually end up happening, and Cancelo has been benched back to back. And that's going to be a huge future problem down the line, but I have major issues now in terms of James and getting him out of my team first. What to do with KDB versus Salah, because it seems like I've definitely made the wrong decision. Even though Salah had blanked in Game Week 18 as well, I thought outside of the first 15 minutes of the game that KDB had been pretty abysmal, to be quite honest. And we know KDB has the level to be one of the top players in the league, but you're seeing someone who's operating like an absolutely fearsome creator in Odegaard, providing so much value at 6.5, 6.6 million. It's just hard to kind of take the constant blanks from KDB, and outside of the chance that he gets the double Game Week 20 locked in, with hopefully Spurs and City sealing the deal post the Game Week 19 deadline, I think I'm going to have to stay with KDB for now. But if we actually start with our defense this week, what I actually have, as I said, is a potential situation where I have to move Trippier to the bench. And I think the reason why I'm doing this is because when I put these two teams on paper, yes, Newcastle are an absolutely ironclad defense, but are they capable of conceding to Arsenal, and especially this Arsenal? They're in fantastic form even with Jesus out. I think absolutely they are. So I think Trippier will probably lose a clean sheet. One thing to mention is Trippier able to get points outside of losing the clean sheet? And the reality is he absolutely is. He's capable of actually getting bonus points, as we saw in the first half in the previous match versus Leeds, where he was on triple bonus even before the clean sheet kind of bonus points were locked in. He was even on a yellow card at this point in time. So it shows how many big chances he's currently creating for this Newcastle team. One thing that I like about this Arsenal team, though, is they are also a fantastic defense. So I do think the Trippier chances will be quite reduced. He also has to deal with that sort of matchup of Martinelli there. And I think Arsenal will be the team hopefully putting on a little bit more threat, which is why I'm thinking that maybe both Martinelli and Trippier should be benched, hoping that there's going to be a relatively tame result towards Arsenal's favour. And I think Newcastle hopefully maybe only scoring 0 or 1 goals. And I'm going to therefore play White instead ahead of Trippier, because I just think Arsenal will win this game. I'm not sure if it's going to be something like a 1-0, 2-0 victory, but I think we know that this Newcastle team have been able to score, although I think Wilson being out of form is a little bit of a positive when you're holding an Arsenal asset and thinking about whether to play their defence. It is a bit dismaying to see that Arsenal have actually lost 2 clean sheets back-to-back, similar to City, without actually creating many expected goals conceded. So on paper, of course, the underlying stats are fantastic from the defence, but they are losing their clean sheets to somewhat miraculous goals. I think Brighton, of course, have always put a lot of pressure on Arsenal, so that's a little bit of a aside. I think Newcastle versus Arsenal is going to be a completely different game, and I think Arsenal playing at home is the key thing here, where we should expect Arsenal to win this game, but it's going to be a very hard-fought battle. So White's going to play for me a little bit reluctantly, and I'm going to play Cancelo as well. And the idea here is, I think if Cancelo gets benched again, I don't think he comes in and steps into the game, because it seems like Pep's very happy with Rico Lewis's performances. What you'll always see with the way Pep kind of lines up his fullbacks now is he has someone who's allowed to invert. So Rico Lewis actually pretty much took exclusively midfield positions in the Everton match, and that is exactly the role that Cancelo plays for the City team as well. Whereas I think Walker might be able to play in the near future for City, so it really just depends on whether Pep's finally open to playing Cancelo again, because I think the most likely partnership that we'll see is going to be Cancelo or Walker, or Rico Lewis plus another player such as Nathan Ake, or even a Laporte in that sort of left-back position. So my thoughts are that Cancelo will probably play this game, and if he doesn't play, then I don't think he's going to come off, similar to the Everton game where he didn't come off the bench, hopefully. And that's going to be the scenario that I'm hoping for, and I'm going to play Cancelo ahead, because I do think there's a good chance that Cancelo can still keep a clean sheet versus this Chelsea team. We've seen Chelsea score in recent games, and we don't really know what's going to happen with this Nottingham Forest game. I imagine Chelsea will probably demolish them, but it's still Man City. It's a very tough task. I don't really think this Chelsea team is quite good enough to score versus City yet, or at least I have some confidence in City being able to keep the clean sheet this week. And so therefore I'm going to play Cancelo and White, and then my third defender is actually going to be a new transfer. My new transfer is going to be Trent. You'll be looking at me and questioning, why are you spending 7.2 million on one of the worst defenses in the league on paper? And Liverpool really have been a pretty poor defense. They've conceded in the last 2 matches as well. But I've been really excited by Trent and his actual attacking output. I think he's been fantastic in the games, the chances created with Robertson being out, hopefully taking some more set pieces. That should be a nice little boost for Trent, and I thought he had a fantastic game last week out, even from the defensive point of view. And now, yes, whilst they still conceded something like a 0.9 expected goals conceded versus Leicester overall, which is indicative of how this Liverpool defence is still not very good, compared to teams like City, where, for example, they conceded to Everton with a 0.08 chance there of expected goals from Demarai Gray, and Arsenal, of course, we know what happened with the West Ham game outside of the penalty. I do think you have a chance here that hopefully this Liverpool defence will do well, and we just know that the attacking edge of Trent is worthwhile to tap into. And now that we're losing Cancelo probably in the future, what I'm thinking is I can afford to go into Trent now, and then eventually maybe Cancelo will actually be a transfer out of my team. So I could probably move into a structure where more money is saved, and then I can actually upgrade any of the forward positions or the midfield positions later on if I'd like. Specifically, if I want to go into a 3-5-2 structure, maybe dropping Andreas. And I actually debuted Mitoma on the cheat sheet last week before he scored the goal versus Arsenal, and I was really happy to see him score that goal. I just think that with him getting nailed minutes with Brighton, I could easily move into a potential 3-5-2 structure once again, tapping into another cheap midfielder with great doubles, replacing Andreas with Mitoma in the future. And I think that money saved from Cancelo, or even the money left after this double transfer that I'm about to debut, should be able to get me towards there. And I think that's quite an interesting transfer attack to actually cover this Brighton team, because we can already see that Trossard's minutes have already dropped a little bit. And Gross had a relatively good creative performance, but it's really hard to pick between the Brighton mids right now, so I'd rather spend as little money as possible to cover them. My midfield, if we head towards the midfield position now, is going to be a relatively similar team, but the difference is I will be dropping Martinelli, and the reason simply is because I just think that Martinelli and De Bruyne are probably the two players closest, in my opinion, to the kind of minimal expected value this week. Yes, KDB has a very tough game versus Chelsea, but I think you can equally put Newcastle up there because they've been able to keep some of the best defensive statistics in the league versus some of the toughest opponents as well. So Newcastle is very fearsome to me. I think that Martinelli has looked incredible, and maybe you'd argue that Martinelli deserves to start over Saka, but I do think that Saka has been very close and doing well in these games, and I don't think him being on 4 yellow cards is really going to preclude me from putting him in my team this week. And I think if I had to pick between Saka and Martinelli, I'd probably pick Saka. If I had to pick between Martinelli and KDB, as I'm saying, I do think Pep will actually play KDB again. It seems like he's very stubborn in playing this sort of team, and he's picked his players sort of to ride this season out with, despite them actually losing around 7 points to Arsenal in terms of fighting for first place. So I can see KDB starting in this Chelsea game. I think it will be key. I think he'll be essential there, and he'll probably play something like 90 minutes again, even though he looks pretty lethargic, as I said, versus Everton, and I'll play KDB there. And Martinelli will unfortunately have to drop into the bench. And this is just going to be a regrettable week because of this Newcastle versus Arsenal mirror matchup. A lot of people might be thinking about dropping Almiron to the bench if they have Almiron. And with Trippier, as I said, you're probably going to make a decision with either the Newcastle or Arsenal defense. This is probably Newcastle's toughest defensive fixture in a while. And I think this is where they lose their clean sheet, even though they've been an electric defense. So here I am dropping Martinelli to the bench. I'm going to be playing KDB, and Saka I'm very happy with already. And as I said, you could obviously go towards some of the other double game week fixtures by attacking some of the other midfielders. We've got Mount, and if you don't have Andreas, I guess you would go into Willian if you really wanted to double up on Fulham in that sort of way. But I can't really see the value of Mount because I still think Mount is playing and getting a lot of touches outside the box, not really that involved inside the box. I still prefer Sterling. His numbers are much better. Havertz is an interesting punt, but he's in the forward position. So I think in terms of the midfield this week, there isn't much to really touch unless you don't have Andreas in your team. And because Andreas is coming into my team, I have to drop one person onto the bench, and that's going to be Martinelli for now. If we move on to the forwards, to kind of round out this team, I'm actually going to move and keep Martial in my team, even though he looked pretty bad versus Wolves. And the reason why is simply I need some value out of Darwin to actually go into Trent. And yes, Darwin has a good fixture on paper versus Brentford. I think Brentford have had some pretty calamitous games. They've had some games where they're able to keep a clean sheet versus a team like West Ham, which is pretty fair. At the same time, you can also see them conceding goals in a blip, right, just versus Tottenham. But I think Tottenham's quality is good enough for you to say that's understandable that a team would concede 2 goals to Tottenham. I think Tottenham have just simply the quality. They scored 2 goals from unexpected goals total of something like 1.1, and that just shows the quality of Tottenham, in my opinion. So I think Brentford have a pretty good chance of actually keeping the scoreline pretty minimal versus Liverpool. Yes, Darwin and Salah have had plenty of chances. Their expected goal numbers are incredible, and I'm already quite regretful of not having Salah. But I'm going to tap out of Darwin here just so I can actually bank on Mitrovic. I still think Mitrovic has the absolute best double game week fixtures, and he's going to be my captain this week. I know it's hard to go and captain someone else outside of Haaland, but I thought that, to be honest, Mitrovic, he's always getting penalties for some odd reason. Around 1 out of 3 games, I think Fulham might be the team with the most amount of penalties in the league. But he's just getting enough chances in each game, and he's got 2 games here. I think that there's enough quality and expected value from Mitrovic to actually captain him, and I'm pretty confident in going for that transfer. Worst case scenario, if Darwin seems interesting, I still think you have to think about the future with Darwin. He's going to have to deal with rotation. Firmino will probably come back from injury. Gakpo will probably be introduced back into the team. And then we'll have a trickle back of injuries and players coming back into this Liverpool team, potential rotation as well, because Darwin's actually playing a lot of minutes. He's played 90 minutes the last 2 matches effectively. So that's the kind of scenario that I think we're in. And Darwin's going to go out of my team. Potentially it's going to be a regret, but I think, look, with his clinical finishing being a question, I think I'm probably not going to lose too much value. Yes, there might be games where Darwin scores a brace, a hat-trick. He's done that, of course, in Benfica, if you've watched him, even in the Champions League. But I'm happy to go without Darwin this week and maybe reassess in the future, especially now that we have Gakpo and the ability to move into a 3-5-2 now that I no longer need Andreas after Game Week 19. So that's going to be my team. I'm going to play Martial. And the reason why I'm playing Martial over someone like Martinelli is simply because I think Martial versus Bournemouth is just too great value. And yes, Martial had a stinker versus Wolves, but look, it's Bournemouth, a much worse team than Newcastle. So I think this is the game where if I'm ever going to play Martinelli on the bench and put Martial over him, it's going to be this game. So this is kind of how I'm lining out my team. Very aggressive. It moves me towards Trent. I feel like I'm actually banking on the value of getting a double free transfer. And I do like Trent's prospects. If we look towards the future, I think Brentford without Tony is a huge little positive here if you're going for Trent, because Tony has so much value and such a great player that I think he directly impacts the strength of this Brentford attack overall. And then, of course, the Brighton game I think is going to be a terrible game for clean sheets for Liverpool, but we know it's going to be quite open-ended both ways, and therefore I'm going to rely on the attacking edge of Trent. You can see, for example, in the previous game versus Leicester, as long as Trent can actually get his way towards either a kind of expected goal involvement through an assist or a goal, you can see he can still get triple bonus points. He got 8 points in a game where he lost a clean sheet, so he can still get you a lot of value there. The one defender that I'm a little bit sad or reluctant to not have in my team is going to be Shaw. I'm not too happy about going for a Chelsea defender this week. I think maybe they keep another clean sheet versus Nottingham Forest, but ultimately your eye test is going to be coming from a game where Chelsea had played versus Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, 2 of the worst teams in the league, next to Southampton probably. And I don't think that's enough for me to say they're going to get some value out of the City game. For what I know, City can easily score 2 goals in that game, and ultimately Azpilicueta or Cucurella's score is just going to be whatever they get in the Fulham game +1. And we already know Fulham's a very devastating attacking team. And I think the one player that I might also miss out here that is a little bit reluctant in terms of the double game week fixtures is going to be Havertz, because he looks very good. Maybe a lot of people will actually flock towards Havertz if he gets another great performance going through Nottingham Forest. But I'm happy to skip Havertz because their fixtures after that are a little bit poor. We know he can be rotated a little bit. And ultimately, I think I can save some money in this team, maybe reassess what to do with De Bruyne in the future, and also take some money out of Cancelo and kind of re-put that in the midfield. Maybe in the future as well, with Odegaard playing so well, I'll have to just go for a triple Arsenal midfield for some reason, because with Odegaard just playing so well, getting so many bonus points each game, I think that there's a genuine question mark to say, what's the point of owning an Arsenal defender, specifically someone like White, who can get subbed off at 59 minutes, which is pretty cheesy. But that's going to be the scenario here, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.